Pokemon Ultra Sun and Ultra Moon are the critically acclaimed sequels to the Pokemon games of the same name, minus the word Ultra. They were pretty well received by the community, judging by the fact that the user score and the Metacritic score for the games sit between 8 and 9. But even though this is the case, I've seen many videos on YouTube and review articles bashing the game, as well as many fans of the series not buying into these games. I mean, this may have something to do with the fact that the game does closely follow the story of the original two games with a few different twists and turns, therefore not really making it a sequel. But the Ultra games have so much more to offer in terms of after-game content. The reason why I'm doing this review and not the usual shenanigans that I get up to is because, for one, the Pokemon franchise has a major factor in shaping my childhood, and therefore I hold it quite dear to me. And secondly, I wanted to provide my opinion on a game that I once had no intention of buying until recently, because much like other fans, I did not want to buy the game. I did not want to buy into what was essentially a reimagining of the previous versions of this generation of Pokemon games. So, out of curiosity and sheer boredom, I sought out a copy of this game and played through as much of it as I possibly could. And boy, do I have a lot to say. I'll start by going over the critiques first because, to be honest, I'm sure you're all mainly here to hear me shout. So that's what I'm gonna do. One of the major things that really bugs me about this reimagining is the clear lack of a main villain. In the previous two titles, the main boss figure of the bad guys was Luzamine. She's the head of the Aether Foundation and is eventually revealed to be the mother of Gladion and Lily. Luzamine was first shown to be a caring lady with the intention to help preserve injured Pokemon in the Aether Paradise, the base of the Aether Foundation. However, she, along with the Foundation, are eventually revealed to be evil, with the player finding out that they had been sponsoring Team Skull to kidnap Lily, and were also conducting inhumane experiments on Pokemon. Luzamine was basically obsessed with Ultra Beast after her husband disappeared into an Ultra Wormhole. Her reasoning for turning evil was because her desire to find her lost husband and her obsession of Ultra Beasts was amplified by neurotoxins being released by the jellyfish Ultra Beast in the Ultra Wormhole, like the one you can see behind her now, which drove her to insanity. It made her love Ultra Beasts more than her own children, so much so that she fuses with this Ultra Beast to essentially become Mega Tentacle Octopus Lady. She even literally tries to kill you after you defeat all of her Pokemon. Obviously to no avail though. After you beat her though, all this information is revealed and she becomes good. A pretty great villain all around though, right? Well, Ultra Sun and Moon cuts this out completely. Ultra Sun and Moon instead decide to have the main villain of the story be Necrozma, a legendary Ultra Beast Pokemon that was essentially out to steal Alola's light. The problem with this change is, however, that Luzamine is no longer portrayed really as a bad guy. Much the same as Guzma ends up not being a good guy in the end. Well, being a good guy in the end. What happens instead is this crazy jellyfish jog ride is replaced with a boss fight with Ultra Necrozma, which is basically Necrozma fused with either Lunala or Solgaleo in its Ultra form. Admittedly, this is a great boss fight and the narrative works, but it sacrifices a great villain in order to pull this off. Luzamine's evil-like behaviour in the scene leading up to the battle with her in her office makes no sense now that her motivation to rescue... Well, now that her motivation is to rescue her husband and defeat Necrozma. Instead of us beating down an amazing villain and having her redeemed at the end, she gets beaten to a pulp by a supposedly evil Ultra Beast Pokemon, and her odd behaviour in the office scene is quickly redeemed by her realising she was being naive and shouldn't have tried to take on Necrozma on her own. I do not like this change at all, and I feel the way that she was portrayed in Sun and Moon was much better than in this game. If this had been an extra chapter instead of being part of the main story with a few tweaks and adjustments, I could totally see this working out quite well. It's just a shame that can't speak today, that one of Pokemon's greatest villains was sidelined for an evil Pokemon. Right. Z-moves. I hate these. Essentially what Z-moves are, they're these insanely powerful moves that can only be used once per battle to deal a huge amount of damage to the opposing Pokemon, or give a massive boost to your stats. Now this would be fine if the difficulty of the game was balanced more to work around this addition. It seems all too easy to breeze through most trainer battles and island trials when most of them only really have you battling 2 Pokemon per battle throughout the game. The gym leader setup would have allowed the game to utilise challenge a bit better by maybe having a few of these gyms using Z moves too, just to up the challenge a bit. Having one move that you can... well, that's essentially your go-to move for knocking out a trainer's most powerful Pokemon is, and I'm sure you will all agree, more boring than trying to build a strategic team with considered items and movesets so that trainer battles feel more intense and interesting. In fact, I went through most of the game only using Z moves for stat buffs, just to make the game harder for myself. If I have to forcibly handicap myself to not use a certain mechanic to make the game harder, then something is wrong with the mechanic that you implemented. Difficulty. The game's difficulty in general is relatively okay, bar Z moves of course. It isn't too easy to the point where you can rocket your way through the game without facing any real challenge, but then again it isn't something that incentivizes you to learn everything there is that you can to gain the edge on your opponents. Which is the problem. Most Pokemon games prior to the newer titles had something I like to call difficulty stages. Depending on how far you have gotten into the game, and how far into the story you've got and who you've battled, essentially, the Pokemon levels got higher, trainers had bigger parties of Pokemon, and new tactics would be used, such as Pokemon holding berries and certain items which healed them in battle or raised their stats one way or another. In this game, however, it's relatively difficult to discern if the game's difficulty was actually getting harder or not. At first it appeared to be scaling up the difficulty a bit when the teacher at the start of the game used a Pokemon with a type advantage, but then it went back to the normal trainers with just one or two Pokemon. Even towards endgame, trainers and Team Skullgrunt still only really had 1 or 2 Pokemon, and were just weak as hell. Like that. Even the Elite Four only had like 5 Pokemon in their party, whereas in previous titles they had 6. The only semblance of challenge I saw in this title that reminded me of previous titles was when fighting Ultra Necrozma. Its level was far higher than most of your team's Pokemon, and he had all his stats boosted by about 2 levels. At least, I think? Well, he had some kind of stat boost anyway. This battle had me restarting the game a bunch of times, organising my Pokemon in my party differently, training my Pokemon better to try and match Ultra Necrozma's unbelievable power, and when I finally beat him, it felt well earned. Good even. With most other trainer battles, I did not really feel the need to stop to do any of this. Whereas in previous games, I had to do this process a good few times. Here I only ever did it once up until the aftergame. But we'll get to that soon. Don't worry. Exploration. Boy, was this disappointing. Exploration in this game has basically been thrown out the window. There are no real secret paths, no alternating paths to come back to later, no blocked off paths, nothing like that. Not even the paths that look, and even the paths that look like they were meant to be secret, shown to you as you basically play through the story. The region of Alola is basically 4 small separate islands and a Pokemon conservation site. These islands are small and offer very little in the way of exploration. This annoyed me to no end because many of the previous Pokemon games had huge sprawling regions filled to the brim with exploration, secret places, iconic locations and more. Johto and Kanto were my absolute favourites because they both featured in a singular game. In this game, however, just doesn't feel the same. All the islands feel extremely disconnected from each other, and the method of getting to other islands involves taking a ferry or flying there. Or, of course, Mantine surfing. Ugh. If they were all connected by some kind of bridge with a bunch of trainers on it, or at least connected in some way so that you could maybe walk from island to island, this would be no issue. I get what they were going for, with each island having its own kahuna and its own island deity and whatnot, but was that all really worth sacrificing exploration? I don't think so. Other activities. Bland. That's all I can say. I mean, seriously, who got excited when they saw that they could take pictures of Pokemon in the wild? At very specific locations, might I add. Like, seriously? I don't care how many NPCs like my photos. I'm not a Pokemon Instagram hoe, alright? And, oh my god. Mantine surfing. Literally just move the D-pad left and right. What fun! I mean, at least the Poke-Plago thingy has some use, but even that is just boring as hell. Yep, just click on the tree and get Pokebeans. Way hey! Fun! Previous Pokemon games had such great extra activities. Remember the slot machines from Fire Red? Hell, remember the Versus Seeker from Fire Red? Remember secret bases in Alpha Sapphire and Omega Ruby? Where you could battle other real-life people who set up their bases there? Remember the mining system from Diamond and Pearl? This minigame? This minigame was the shit back in the day. Fuck, man. I remember doing this for like hours with my brother. This shit was so fun. There were so many great things from previous Pokemon games they could have included in Ultra Sun and Moon, but just didn't. It just makes me question even more how they supposedly pushed the 3DS to its limits. Maybe if they hadn't included such useless extra activities, maybe they'd have room for better things. Jeez. I think the takeaway from these critiques is that overall there are a lot of things that Ultra Sun and Moon could have done so much better. Praises. Now, I bet you are all wondering, wow, there are so many things about this game that you don't like. How can you possibly say that you like it so much, and that it has so much to offer? Well, my skeptical viewer, let me enlighten you. The main story. It's actually pretty decent. Team Skull have to be one of my most favourite teams in the entire Pokemon franchise. They just have so much personality and flair about them. They're a very self-aware team that basically know that they're a meme within the Pokemon community. What with the grunts knowing that they are called grunts, and their gangster walk, and their little dance and shit. The grunt gag really got me. I'm not gonna lie, when they're like, we're both called Grunt. That actually did get me. It was pretty funny. My man Guzma's got to be the best. It was actually quite sad though to learn that while they seem to have this kind of evil, gangsterish, theme going on with them, their hometown is just so drab, depressing, and impoverished. I mean, damn, that's some sad shit. And the track that plays just really empties your heart, and just unsettles you completely. They're a very memorable team that I hold dearly to my heart. Learning a lot about Alolan tradition too is quite nice, adds a lot of personality to the region. Becoming the champion at the end also feels quite rewarding too. It's overall a relatively interesting storyline that I found myself getting quite invested into. The soundtrack is amazing. From Team Skull's sick beats to the Kahuna's daunting but all around happy theme, to Ultra Necrozma's badass techno vibes and the Totem Pokemon's grandiose theme, to even some of the old remix tracks too, Pokemon Ultra Sun's soundtrack really hits the nail on the head. I cannot tell you how many times I've just decided to blast the soundtrack so loud and just absorb the epicness that is this OST. It's that good. The Ultra Wormhole. This was a feature that I thought was absolutely great. Being able to fly through ultra space and travel to different dimensions and worlds, even to the sun and moon dimension that has become totally uninhabitable due to a catastrophic event caused by an ultra beast. You can also get, you know, some of the legendaries from previous Pokemon games with their old individual soundtracks still intact. Thank you so much, Game Freak. Fucking love you for that. Best people ever. You also have a higher chance of finding shinies too, depending on what wormhole you get into. That sounded kind of wrong. I also just generally find the idea of travelling through ultra wormholes fascinating in itself, because you can literally just imagine any scenario that could happen. And Game Freak took this concept to like a whole other level. The Team Rainbow Rocket bonus motherfucking episode. This bonus episode is an absolute masterpiece. Giovanni comes to Alola through an ultra wormhole along with all of Team Rocket and takes over the Aether Paradise, making it look something like Bowser's Castle. In it, you basically have to solve a bunch of puzzles akin to those found in previous Pokemon titles, which I absolutely enjoyed, surprisingly. All the fucking while beating all the other bosses from all of the previous titles in order to advance through the castle. All of them, of which have achieved their own evil plans in their own dimensions, and all of them with remixed boss themes, boys. Man, look at this dude. Okay, I just realised that it cut to him. Man, look at this, look at this evil motherfucker. Like, can it get any better than this? Can it? Like, Game Freak, I bloody love you for this. Now, while this bonus episode did basically give me a massive hard-on, not gonna lie, and to be honest, I don't think they could possibly top this like level of fan service in any game, it did leave a lot to be desired, specifically because the episode was pretty short. Originally, what I thought would have happened was that each of the teams would come to Alola and basically wreak havoc on their individual terms, instead of each team leader working for Giovanni. You know, have an episode dedicated to each team. It would have allowed for such an amazing post-game and a truly memorable way for the Pokemon games to leave the 3DS in style. Remixing all the old tracks and making them just 1,000 times more epic and dark. Unfortunately, this isn't quite what we got, though I'm definitely not complaining. What we got in this bonus episode was epic and memorable enough for it to be ingrained in my memory forever. The post-game. There is a hell of a lot of things to do post-game. Me personally, I still have not experienced all of these things yet, but there are a couple of videos by Austin John Plays that explains the various things you can do after you beat the main game and bonus episode. There is a boatload of things to do in this game after you beat it. In Pokemon Sun and Moon, which is the previous games to the Ultra series, there are about 33 things you can do post-game, whereas with Pokemon Ultra Sun and Ultra Moon there are 128 things you can do post-game, around 3 to 4 times more than its previous version, therefore showing the huge amount of content that there is to be enjoyed in these Ultra games. Conclusion. Well, while I did point out a lot more bad things about this game in this review compared to the good, most of the discrepancies are pretty much dwarfed massively by the amount of good this game has to offer. It's a well above average Pokemon game I personally believe everyone should experience, especially if you are a long-term fan of the series like myself. And also if you've played most of the previous Pokemon games as well, because there is a shitload of fan service here. This is a Pokemon experience like no other. And the best part is, you get to take it with you wherever you go. Thank you guys so much for watching. If you did enjoy, please do hit the like button, and if you want to see more videos like this, then subscribe. I do apologise to my current fans who have been waiting a long time for me to post a new video. I've been extremely preoccupied with a lot of stuff, however I do promise to get more videos out, so you know, just have to be patient now, because this shit actually does kind of take a long time. But thank you guys so much for watching, and I will see you all in the next video. Kaboom!